You open your lab results, and you see a PSA somewhere between 4 and 10, and almost instantly, your mind starts racing. Is this prostate cancer? Do I need a biopsy right now? Why is this happening if I feel completely fine? Is this serious? If that sounds like you, pause for a second. Take a breath, because the first thing you need to know is this. A PSA between 4 and 10 does not automatically mean prostate cancer. Doctors often call this range the gray zone. It's high enough to get attention, but it's not specific enough to give a clear answer by itself. And that's exactly why it feels so frustrating. It's not low enough to ignore, but it's also not a diagnosis. That uncertainty is what makes so many men anxious. In this video, I'll walk you through what this gray zone actually means, why PSA can rise even when cancer is not present, and what doctors usually look at next before deciding whether more testing, like an MRI or a biopsy, is really needed. So if you're staring at a PSA result and feeling like you've been handed a medical riddle, stay with me. By the end of this video, you'll understand this number much more clearly. And more importantly, you'll understand what the next step may be. What is PSA, and why does this number cause so much stress? PSA stands for prostate-specific antigen. It's a protein made by the prostate gland, and a small amount of it can be measured in the blood. Now here's the key point. PSA is not a prostate cancer diagnosis. It's a signal, a clue, a flag that tells us we may need to look more closely. Think of it like a smoke alarm. If the alarm goes off, you take it seriously. But the alarm itself doesn't tell you whether there's a major fire, burnt toast, or just steam from the shower. That's how PSA works. It can rise because of cancer, but it can also rise for other reasons. And that's why the number alone never tells the full story. For many men, a PSA below 4 has traditionally been seen as reassuring, but even that is not perfect. Some men with a PSA below 4 can still have prostate cancer, and many men with a PSA above 4 do not. That's why a PSA between 4 and 10 sits in this uncomfortable middle ground, the gray zone. It's not normal enough to dismiss, but it's not specific enough to panic over. Why is 4 to 10 called the gray zone? Because this is the range where doctors usually ask more questions instead of jumping to conclusions. When PSA falls between 4 and 10, the risk of prostate cancer is higher than average, but it is still far from certain. So this number creates uncertainty, not clarity. And honestly, uncertainty is often the hardest part. Most people don't panic because they understand too much. They panic because they don't know what the number means. That's why this range causes so much fear. It's not a clean answer. It's not everything is fine. And it's not, this is definitely cancer. It's a signal that says, we need more context. And good medicine is all about context. Not just numbers, not just lab values, not just one red flag on one report. Real medicine looks at the whole picture. Yes, absolutely. And this is one of the most important things to understand. A PSA in the 4 to 10 range can be caused by several things besides prostate cancer, including benign enlargement of the prostate, inflammation of the prostate infection, age-related changes, and sometimes temporary factors around the time of testing. So when men hear your PSA is elevated, they often assume that means cancer. But that is not how this works. An elevated PSA means we need to look more closely, not jump straight to the worst-case scenario. And this is where a lot of the anxiety comes from. Because a PSA test is sensitive, but it is not highly specific. In plain English, that means it is pretty good at telling us something might be going on, but not very good at telling us exactly what that something is. So yes, PSA matters. But PSA alone is not enough. This is where the conversation becomes much more useful, because when PSA falls in the gray zone, experienced doctors usually do not make decisions based on that number alone. They look deeper. Sometimes the first step is simply repeating the test under the right circumstances. Why? Because big decisions should not always be made from one isolated lab value. If there's any reason to think the number may have been temporarily influenced, repeating the PSA can help show whether this is a true pattern or just a one-time bump. Doctors may also look at something called the free PSA percentage. This can sometimes help estimate whether the elevated PSA is more likely related to benign prostate conditions or something more concerning. It's not perfect, but it adds useful context. This is a very important concept that many patients have never heard of. PSA density looks at the PSA level in relation to the size of the prostate. Why does that matter? Because a larger prostate can naturally make more PSA. So if someone has a large benign prostate and a PSA of 6, that may mean something very different from a person with a smaller prostate and the exact same PSA. That's one reason PSA density has become so valuable in modern prostate evaluation. Doctors may also look at PSA velocity, which simply means how quickly the PSA is rising over time. One number is a snapshot, a trend is a story, and trends can tell us much more than a single data point. In many cases, doctors now consider a prostate MRI before jumping straight to biopsy. This has become increasingly important because MRI can help identify suspicious areas and improve decision-making. Not every man with a PSA in the gray zone needs an immediate biopsy. Sometimes MRI helps clarify who really needs one and who may not. And that is a major shift in modern prostate care. The goal is not just to find cancer. The goal is to find the cancers that truly matter, while avoiding unnecessary procedures in men who may not need them. Not necessarily. And for many men, that is a relief. A biopsy is the test that can confirm whether prostate cancer is present. But a PSA between 4 and 10 does not automatically mean you should rush straight into one. The decision to biopsy usually depends on several factors together, including your age, your family history, whether your PSA is changing over time, your free PSA, your PSA density, your physical exam, and whether an MRI shows anything suspicious. So the next step should not be panic. The next step should be a better evaluation. That is the whole point of the gray zone. It tells us we need more information before making a major decision. In my experience, what frightens most men is not just the word cancer. It is the feeling of not knowing where they stand. That is what makes the gray zone so emotionally difficult. It does not give you a clear answer. It leaves you hanging between reassurance and fear. And that is a hard place to be. A man can handle a lot when he understands what is happening. What is much harder is not knowing what the result means or what comes next. That is why education matters so much. Because the difference between panic and clarity is often not the lab result itself. It is the explanation. Here is the practical part. First, do not diagnose yourself from one lab report, and definitely do not let the internet convince you that one number equals one outcome. I say that with kindness, because I know how tempting it is. But reading 12 worst-case forum posts at 1:30 in the morning is not a treatment plan. It is just insomnia with Wi-Fi. Second, Ask the right questions. A better conversation with your doctor might include questions like, should I repeat the PSA? Could anything have temporarily raised this result? Would free PSA or PSA density help in my case? Should I get an MRI? Based on my risk factors, do I actually need a biopsy now? Those are useful questions. Third, understand that watching closely is not the same as doing nothing. Sometimes men hear, let's monitor this, and think that means the doctor is brushing them off. Not at all. In many cases, close follow-up is the smartest and safest next step. Good medicine is not always fast medicine. Sometimes it is careful medicine. Fourth, remember that the same PSA number does not mean the same thing in every man. A PSA of 5 in one person may carry a different meaning in someone else. That is why context matters. Medicine is not just math, it is interpretation. Instead of asking only, do I have cancer or not? Ask, what might be causing this PSA result? How concerning is it in my specific case? What other tests help clarify the picture? Do I need immediate action, or do I need better information first? That is a more useful way to think, because the goal is not just to react to the number. The goal is to make the right decision, based on the right information. So let's bring this all together. If your PSA is between 4 and 10, you are in what doctors often call the gray zone. That means the number is elevated enough to take seriously, but not specific enough to diagnose prostate cancer on its own. It does not automatically mean cancer. It does mean you may need a closer look. That next step may involve repeating the PSA, looking at free PSA, checking PSA density, reviewing the trend over time, considering an MRI, and in some cases, discussing biopsy. The most important thing is this: do not let one number make all your decisions for you. Let that number start a smarter conversation. If this video helped you understand your PSA result more clearly, subscribe to Prostate Clarity, because this channel is here to help you make sense of confusing prostate test results, without the panic, without the jargon, and without the late-night Google spiral. And share this video with someone who is staring at a lab result right now and wondering whether to worry, breathe, or hide under the kitchen table. Honestly, breathing is usually the better first step